Hey guys, Toby Mathis here, and today I have a special guest, Erin from Erin Talks Money. Hey, Erin.
Hi, thanks for having me.
And it's so great to have you here. And today we're going to be talking about retirees. And specifically, I want to talk about the biggest Social Security surprises that retirees have. What are the things that you see that people repeatedly, kind of the mistakes they make or the common concerns they have that hit them every time? So this should be a really fun one, guys, because this is not something that I tend to get into on my channel. So that's why you bring in experts. Erin, what are the big ones? Like, what are the things that you see consistently that when somebody retires that they may not have known or they may be surprised by?
I would say let's start off by saying claiming right at 62. And it's not to say that's always a mistake, but I repeatedly hear from people, I'm going to claim at 62 because the trust fund is going to be depleted and they're going to cut benefits. And I just do not see a world in which Congress doesn't act. Yes, we have a trust fund shortfall on the horizon. It's been, projected for 2032, 2033, depending on which projection you're reading. But I mean, this happened in the 80s, and it was weeks before checks would be affected. I think it was about 4 weeks, and then Congress finally acted. So I think we're going to see something similar to that. And they have a lot of levers they can pull. They can adjust income taxes. They can adjust the benefits formula. I think people who are receiving Social Security now, people who are in their 50s, people who are in their 60s, I don't think anything's going to be affected. But I think we might see changes for like people in my generation, people who are in their 30s, people who are in their 20s, those kind of things. So that's my biggest one, is that people claiming because they think the trust fund is going to run out. Now, if somebody wants to claim at 62 and that works for their plan, that's great. The other thing I see is people thinking they have to claim right when they retire. And again, it depends. How does that fit within your retirement plan? Have you looked at, I look at Social Security as your income floor. And the higher you can make your income floor from reliable or guaranteed income streams in retirement, generally that greater sense of security we have, because then we're not dependent on, say, a market or a portfolio, which might fluctuate a great deal depending on what's going on in the economy. So I think not looking at Social Security broadly as part of your plan or making reactive decisions. Married couples, also, I would say, make sure you coordinate. And for married couples, often the best claiming strategy is not claiming at the same time. It's often staggering that, having the higher income earner claim later. And that way they lock in a higher survivor's benefit for whichever spouse passes away first. Having the lower income earner claim early, maybe at 62, maybe it's at full retirement age, but staggering those benefits often results in the highest lifetime benefit for a couple.
Yeah, so you zeroed right in on when to actually start collecting your Social
Yeah.
Security. So when can somebody start collecting their Social Security, and what is their option? Can they push it indefinitely, or is there a timeline to these things?
Yeah, you can start claiming as early as 62. For most people, there are circumstances where you might get it a little bit earlier. But for most people, it's 62. And then full retirement age, which simply means 100% of your benefit, for most people is now 67. It was a staggered claiming until this year or next year, but 67 for most people is full retirement age. And you can claim all the way up for get delayed retirement credits up until the age of 70. So if you claim early at 62, you get a 30% reduction from your full retirement age, 67 generally. If you claim full retirement age, you get 100% of your benefit. And then if you claim at 70, you get delayed retirement credits, which increase your benefit 8% per year until 70. You're never going to delay past 70. It doesn't increase. So that's the latest you would claim. And I always like to clarify, full retirement age is just an age determined by Social Security. You don't have to look at that and say that's when I have to claim. That's just when they've determined that's 100% of your benefit.
All right, so the average benefit is somewhere around 1,800. Is that right, or is it?
As of 2026 is a little higher. It is, I believe, $2,081 if we want to get like specific. Again, if you worked a full retire, or if you've worked a full career, you have 35 years of earnings, you're going to be higher than that for the typical worker, because this average is encompassing survivor's benefits, widow benefit, or which survivor, widow, spousal benefits, people who are on disability, people who have fractional careers and didn't do a full 35 years. So that average is actually pulled down a little bit.
So the reason I was trying to get a numbers to get an idea. So like at 67, if I was getting 2 grand,
Yeah.
that means at 62, I would get approximately what? What do you think it would be?
30% reduction. So,
600
God, you're
less,
making
so about 1,400 bucks.
1,400. Don't make me do math.
Give or take. Yeah, I
Yes,
don't mean to put you on the spot.
1,400.
But
Yes.
$1,400 is what you'd start getting. So you'd have, what would that be, like 5 years of that lower amount?
Yes.
And so I'm sure there's math that says, hey, you'll eventually, your break even is at
Yeah.
some point in the future if
It
you take too
typically is
early.
late 70s, mid 70s, depending on your benefit between claiming early and full retirement age. And then full retirement age to 70 usually pushes you into the early 80s. And if you were talking about a $2,000 benefit at full retirement age, it'd be 2,400 at 70. So it depends. Yeah. How long you're going to live. I think calculating what's called the break even point, that is, figuring out when you'd earn the exact same amount and then a higher benefit or higher lifetime benefit between claiming early or delayed claiming. I don't think the break even point is the full part of the story. I think if you want to look at it from a math stance, yes, it matters. But how most of us live our lives is monthly, figuring out how much we're receiving this month, next month. What does my budget look like? Most of us are not looking at how much earnings we're getting over a lifetime.
Yeah, and a dollar for today is worth quite a bit more than a dollar in 10 years or whatever it
Yes.
might be. I don't know what the break even point is. I'd heard like 78 in
Yeah.
one case, but it's like, okay, so my dollar today versus that. Plus, I don't know how long I'm going to live.
Yes. I just think, say we have a household that needs $3,000 a month to cover their expenses, and say we have two income earners. Well, if they're limited on savings or any other income sources, if they both claim early at 62, you're just shy of that, likely. Or what if they delay a little bit? Now they have a surplus. So it depends on how much you want to rely on your portfolio or other income sources. So I do think there's a good argument for making that income floor as strong as possible. Not to say that people have to wait until 70, but I just think look at your household expenses. And to me, a more important thing is being able to comfortably meet your expenses on a regular basis rather than focusing on a break even point.
Yeah, it sounds like the old a bird in the hand. If
Yeah.
I know that I'm set now
Yeah.
and I don't have to worry about it, then fantastic. Then I can make sure that I have my floor met and I less anxiety, peace of mind. All right, which brings us to the big question that everybody's always going to ask, which is, well, how is it taxed? Are Social Security benefits actually taxed?
They are. The good news is 100% of your benefit is never taxed. There's caps on it. So whether you are single or married, the brackets do change just like our income tax brackets. So you have a portion of Social Security that's taxed at 0%. We can get some exact figures. We'll look at married filing jointly. So any benefits under 32,000 for the household would be taxed at 0%. Then when we get benefits between 32 and $44,000, 50% of that benefit would be taxable. And then anything over 44%, up to 85% of that would be taxable. And provisional income does factor in all other income sources. So when we're talking about $44,000 of income, we're talking about are you pulling draws from taxable accounts? Do you have rental properties? Do you have work income? All of this is going to be factored in.
Even tax-free munis are added into that.
Yes, they are. That's one of those gotcha moments. A lot of people forget about that.
What's not included, though, is like borrowing against insurance policy, or borrowing against your stocks, or borrowing against your house. You can still get those.
Yep.
So your Social Security benefits could be taxable. So if you're taking 40,000 a year, the max of that could be taxable is what, 85% of it?
Yes, max.
But it's not 85% because part of that's at 0, part of that's at 50, and then part of that's at 85%. So you have
Yes.
to take a lot of money in to get to where it's at that 85%.
Yeah. So the max, if we say somebody has a higher income, other sources of income, the max portion of your Social Security that would be considered taxable would be 85% of your benefit. And then it's just run through your traditional income tax brackets. So whatever your bracket is.
Yeah, and then you have your standard deduction.
Yep.
married filing jointly, what is that? $32,200
Yeah.
this year. Plus you get, if you're
Bonus junior
65 or over,
deduction.
you get an extra
Yep.
more than that actually. I think it's like 3,000 something.
Yeah.
Plus you get another 6,000 is it per person. That's under the one big
Yeah.
beautiful bill.
Yeah.
So you
Subject to income thresholds. Yeah.
Yeah, that one's yeah. So you could have up to I think it's 47,000 ish,
Hmm.
47,500 deductible.
Yeah.
So people that are really worried about their Social Security, and then you're in the 10% and 12%
Yes.
category. Like I the reason I'm bringing this up is because I see this with people, and they're like, oh my gosh, I need to do a Roth conversion. I need to do
Mm.
this, and because taxes are going up, and I'm like, statistically in retirement, you're going to be in the
They're going to go
teens.
down.
Yeah, your taxes your tax bracket should decline.
Yes.
I don't
And I
know.
would say, you look at somebody with, say, a six-figure income, $100,000, a lot of people are concerned at that point. And I'm like, you still have those deductions. You're going to be in a very low effective tax rate.
So you deal with retirees all the time. In fact, you do questionnaires with these folks as part of your practice.
Yeah.
What is something that you see consistently that surprises you that you're like, oh my gosh, this keeps happening over and over again? What are some of the things that you see where you're like, come on, guys?
Roth conversions are a big one. You mentioned it. I would say there's a lot of hype around a Roth conversion. It's very clickable content. It makes headlines. So everyone starts to feel like they have to do it. And I would say most people don't have to do it. I think, there's an argument for it when you have very, very robust traditional accounts. And if you combine that with having low income years, say you retire at 58, you're delaying when you claim Social Security, you're not bringing in active income. Well, all of a sudden, you've got big deductions. You've got the 10%, the 12% bracket. You can convert there, and that way you'll lower your future RMDs. So, kind of as we talked about, it's tax bracket management and making sure that you reduce your overall lifetime taxes. But for the typical American who has, $200,000 in savings, RMDs are not going to be a problem. I wouldn't make an argument for doing Roth conversions.
So what I've seen with some of my clients that are in the higher income ranges, we got a lot of them since we have so many investors that we work with. When they do that, they do qualified charitable
Mm-hmm.
deductions directly from their IRAs. Do you see that in your work?
I do, but I would also say charitable contributions are not used as often as I would like to see. Because I think we kind of have this scarcity mindset when we retire, and we worry so much of, will I be able to fund the next 30 years? Will I run into a long-term healthcare event that ends up costing, say, $50,000 a year if I need long-term care, nursing care, memory care, something like that? So I have retirees who really are charitably inclined, but they're scared to do it because they're scared of running out of money. But I feel like if you could set up a charitable trust, or if you could do those qualified charitable distributions, which come out of your IRA and they don't affect your tax bracket at all, I think it's a way to kind of see your legacy in action. And I think it's really rewarding.
Yeah, and they don't affect your provisional
Mm-hmm.
tax
Yeah, they
bracket
don't
either.
affect your
Like
taxes
Social
at all.
Security, yeah, it actually just it's a big nothing.
Yeah.
We see that. And now, how about the people that you see when they're retiring? How organized are they? Do they know where all their money's coming from? What do you see?
This is something that's really surprising because if you read the surveys, from Charles Schwab, or you read the surveys from the Fed, some of these surveys are pretty fascinating because people look at the income that's coming in on a regular basis. Say they have an annuity, say they have a pension, say they're claiming Social Security. They're very aware of that income that hits their bank account every single month. But then a lot of people who are taking draws from their investments, whether it's a brokerage, whether it's a traditional, whether it's a Roth, they might pull $15,000 and then not pull anything for 6 months. When they're surveyed, they forget about that $15,000. And depending on where it came from, whether or not you forgot about it, the IRS doesn't.
And that's all of that gets added in and is calculated. When we say provisional income,
Yes.
this is how we're calculating whether your Social Security is taxable and at
Yes.
what level. Is all that dumps in and is calculated towards provisional income too, right?
Yes, I mean, anything outside the Roth, those Roths are tax-free, which is great. But if it's a brokerage account, it counts. If it's A traditional account that counts as ordinary income. We can make the caveat that when it comes to brokerage accounts, it might be subject to long-term capital gains, but we do have brackets that we have to pay attention to there as well. So a lot of people think, oh, if I pull from my brokerage, it's always taxed at 0%. But the thing is, you always have to consider other income sources, because once you hit those certain thresholds, for married couples, it's around $96,000, and it's looking at all income sources. Once you hit that, you bump up into that 15% threshold. The 20% threshold, I think, is around like $500,000 for married couples, maybe $600,000. So it's a ways up there.
No, you're nailing it. That's the big one. People don't realize that qualified dividends and long-term capital gains, including off the sale of a house, all these things come into play where you're looking at it, which, by the way, somebody retires, they sell their house, they do a big Roth conversion. What are some of the nasty things that you see triggered that they didn't anticipate when they do something like that?
I would say that one of the ones that takes people by surprise is IRMAA surcharges, income-related monthly adjustment amounts, which pertain to your Medicare. Baseline Medicare for Part B and D have a copay. For B, it's $202 and some change for a standard person. But once you start to go up in income, they add a surcharge. And those surcharges can work their way all the way up to an additional $300 or $400 a month per person in the household if the household income exceeds certain thresholds. So most people are going to fall within those ranges and not have the highest income possible. But if you sold a house, if you did massive Roth conversions, you can easily work your way up there. And even if you cross a threshold by $1, you end up paying this surcharge. But IRMAA doesn't hit in the year you make this sale or this conversion. It hits 2 years after the fact. And so I think it's easy to forget about, oh, I sold that home 2 years ago, or I did that conversion 2 years ago. Why is it affecting me today? And there are certain IRMAA surcharges that you can appeal. Like if you had a really high income and then you retired, you can say, oh, my income changed, and they'll knock your surcharge off. But if you did a Roth conversion, you can't appeal that. If you sold a house, you can't appeal that. You just have to pay it.
Gosh, so it's like a delayed surprise. So you do this, you saw something online or you talked to your accountant and they said, hey, do you think your taxes are going up or down? And you're like, oh, the government needs more money. They're going to raise my taxes. And so you do that Roth conversion and you hammer yourself. 2 years later, you get a surprise. Is it your Medicare premiums?
Medicare, yep.
And you have to do these, right? Like, so everybody, can you explain that real quick? Because I know that at least my clients, not everybody is aware of this stuff. You hit 65, you kind of have to do this?
Yeah, I mean, there are exceptions. If you're covered by a workplace plan, you might not have to enroll right away. But, when you do enter retirement, most people enroll at 65. That's the most common age. A little bit of flexibility here and there. But Medicare isn't free. Part A is free for most people with comprehensive work histories. But once you get to Part B, there is a copay. And that copay for the traditional person, again, I say traditional because most people fall in a typical income range within the US, and that is $202. But for every threshold you cross, there's an additional surcharge. And say we did a massive Roth conversion and it bumped up that household income. Let's say, just to use a nice round number, that you get an additional $200 per person in the household on Medicare, you get that additional $200 surcharge that has to be paid by both people. So now all of a sudden your Part B is $400 per person for the entire year.
$4,800 for the year.
Yeah.
Because you did something and you were like, oh, this is really smart. It's going to save me in the future. And it just hit you.
Yeah.
I don't know all the difference between A, B, C, and D. Can you just give us a glossing over of that?
Oh gosh. Yeah. A is hospital insurance. B is more of like doctor's visits. D is prescriptions. C pertains to the type of plan you're on. There are actually E and O, we just don't refer to them in that way, but you're going to have Medigap plans and Medicare Advantage plans, which will fall into different parts, but we tend to refer to them by the name of Medigap or Medicare Advantage. And these are plans that will kind of plug the holes, so to speak. Like, how do you want to address what a copay looks like and whether or not you're seeing network providers or you have a more open network access. So that's how you would decide, do I want a Medicare Advantage or a Medigap plan?
If somebody's curious, like they're sitting here listening and they're like, okay, you just made my head spin. What is this Medicare stuff? And should I be doing this? And what kind of insurance? And what are my options?
Yes.
Do you have somebody you send people to
I
that?
do. I use Chapter. They're a wonderful resource because when it comes to Medicare, I think it's incredibly confusing trying to figure out, do you want a network? Do you want those open networks? How do you make sure you have access to the doctors you want? What are prescriptions going to cost? Do you want a dental plan? Do you want a hearing plan? Do you want a vision plan? And different plans offer these and different plans don't. So I like the idea of calling Chapter because their advisors are very transparent. They don't have an incentive to sell you one plan or another. The really cool idea behind Chapter is that all of their agents earn an hourly wage or a salary, so they don't earn a commission off selling you the more expensive plan or the less expensive plan. So their income doesn't depend on it. They get to be completely unbiased. I would say, if you want a quick rundown of if a Medicare Advantage plan, usually those have a $0 monthly premium. You can't say free. Congress does regulate that, but a $0 monthly premium. But it generally has higher out of pocket expenses. And usually it becomes more expensive over time when healthcare needs tend to increase throughout retirement. Most people who would benefit from this plan are generally those who have really robust health. A Medigap plan usually has a higher monthly premium, but less out of pocket costs. And most people who would benefit from this are generally those with chronic conditions or those who end up with larger healthcare expenses because you're capped on how much you're going to pay. And usually it's restricted to your monthly premiums.
Okay, so can you share with us a link so that people could go and talk to them? I'm sure
Yeah,
that you have a relationship with them.
I do. I do. Yep. It's Ask Chapter. I want to check if it's .org or
I'll
.com, but
put it
it's
in the
Ask
show notes.
Chapter.
So if you just share it
Okay.
out with me, I'll put it in there so people can click on it for
Yep.
sure.
Ask Chapter. And they're wonderful. I'll give you a phone number and everything too, but their advisors
Okay.
are wonderful.
You give that to me. I'll put it in the show notes so people can access it. Now, for folks who don't realize, Erin, you have a very popular channel on YouTube, and you do a lot of work, and you work primarily with retirees. Is that fair to say?
Pre-retirees and retirees. Yeah.
Pre-retirees and retirees. We're all pre-retirees, right?
I know, right? I'm 38 and I'm a pre-retiree.
Um, what are the big things that you're seeing? Because you're talking to folks every day on this topic. What are the big topics that you're hearing? So I heard from you that there's some people anxious about whether Social Security is going to be there. We just hit on some of the taxation. We're going to be required to do Medicare. But what are some other things that you consistently hear about that are kind of like the hot buttons right now?
I would say if you watch my videos, there's a common theme to kind of nudge people into having the courage to spend in retirement. I am a big proponent that you can likely take more than 4% out of your portfolio. You can use guardrail strategies. You can be flexible. I think one of the biggest things I see and what I think is a great tragedy is that we get to retirement. We've spent 30, 40 years saving up this pile of money. And everyone has this idea, okay, I'll hit 65, I'll retire. Let's say I save up $1 million, I'll utilize the 4% rule. But what happens and what the research shows is that most people withdraw about 2% from their portfolio because they have a fear of drawing down this pile of money they worked so hard to create. And I think the greatest tragedy there is that you've sacrificed for these 30 or 40 years, and then you continue to sacrifice for the rest of your life. It's not that I want you to spend more just for the sake of spending more. I want people to extract the most joy per dollar, whether that is spending on your kids, to a travel with your spouse, or like a charity you want to donate to. I think money is meant to be used in a way that brings our life value. And for most of us, not everyone, but for most of us, having the biggest bank account possible is not what brings us the greatest joy.
I, I'm going to double up on that. I think that and I know you've talked about this too, on there's psychological pain that's associated with losing money, spending money that comes out of the pile. We have no problem paying what gets generated from the pile of money. So
Yeah.
like people are pretty good about spending what gets deposited in their account every month from Social Security, or if you're getting dividends or rents from things, they're pretty good about doing that. Or if you have a side job, you could spend that.
Yeah, that's
God,
income.
yeah, but God forbid you touch the pile.
Yeah.
And it is kind of getting over some of that. I'm a big believer that if you can live off of the income that something's produced, you never have to touch it, but it allows you,
Yeah.
to create greater legacies too. Like
Yes.
you can direct what the
Well,
money does.
I have
Um,
kids, or I have a kid. I love the idea of leaving a legacy behind. I want him to have a better life than I did. I still want him to work, so I'm not going to give him everything. But I really think, and in line with your idea, if we can have these reliable income streams that cover our necessities, all of a sudden our portfolio is the fun thing. That's the trip to Europe. That's the trip
yeah,
to Disney with the entire family that you're like, guys, it's all on me. Like, I worked my whole life to be able to do this. Let's go create memories. Or it's the big cruise you take, or maybe it's the renovation in your home that you always wanted to do. But it gets to be discretionary, because then if the market is performing poorly, you say, all my necessities are covered. I just won't take a draw this year.
yeah. I saw a study on the 4% rule. I'm not a big fan of it, but
Yeah.
the 4% rule, it was made for doomsday. Like it was
Yeah.
made for the worst of days. It's kind of like putting a metal roof on your house with if there's heavy snow and
Yes.
then it never snows. Like, hey, just in case it might snow and you're living in Southern California, you put on this just blast proof roof and it's kind of like, but not going to happen. I think the average
Well,
was somebody who retired with a million ended up with 10 million when they
yes,
passed. It
I
was some
think
reason.
it depends on which study you see, but yes, I would agree with that. The person who retires with a million is likely going to end up with exponentially more at the end of life. Sometimes I say at the end of retirement, and I get a lot of pushback on that, but I don't like to say death. I feel like that's a bit of a downer. Yes, the 4% rule was for one specific person who retired in 1968 and went through really high inflation, poor performing market. So it was one specific retiree. I often refer to him as David. And I'm like, why are we all trying to be David? Like, if you look at the median withdrawal rate that the 4% rule supposedly produced, the median was actually closer to 6 to 7%. And if we had a really robust market that people retired into, it was actually 9, 10, or 11%. But if I went out there and I said, oh, you could draw 9% from your portfolio in a year, oh my gosh, people come out with knives and daggers.
Yep. Plus you have Social Security, plus you
Yep.
have Medicare,
Yep.
plus you have Medicaid if you fall and like
Yeah.
that's the safety net. It's a lot of people are like, well, what happens? And there's anxiety, right?
Yeah.
Do you
Or
see that in your studies?
I do. Running out of money, I would think, is the biggest fear for retirees. You mentioned these fallbacks. You've got Social Security, you've got Medicare, you've got Medicaid. Worst case scenario, you'll be able to get health care. I would think you could speak to this one. A lot of people get to retirement and they don't factor in their home. You could have your equity in your home as a backstop if you needed long-term care or potentially a reverse mortgage or things like that. Like, your home is a huge asset.
Or you could have things like whole life, index universal
Mhm.
life, which some people hate and some people love. Some people oversell them, some people undersell them.
Mhm.
The reason that you have insurance is for that unlikely scenario where you're just borrowing against the policy, or you can draw against the death benefit if you need long-term care, or you can just go get a long-term care policy. They're a little bit tougher now to get, right?
Yeah, I would say a long-term care policy is an option. I don't think it's the optimal choice for most people. They are very expensive. For a middle retiree, I would probably just say fund a healthcare bucket. You get to retirement and maybe you put away $50,000 and you earmark that and you're like, that's my future healthcare bucket. Or for someone who does have a whole life policy, not that I'm advocating someone buy a whole life policy the day they retire, but if they already have that in place, you can usually add a rider for long-term care, and then you could use some of the benefits and they would just reduce the payout for when you pass away.
Yeah, I had that in my family with both
Yeah.
parents, and it's people think it's millions of dollars. It's not.
No.
Right now, nursing home is probably $10,000 a month on average.
Yeah.
If you're in an assisted living, it's probably 7,000 a month on average. Memory care, my dad had Alzheimer's, so it was about 7,000 a month. But the total
We're dealing with
benefit,
that with
yeah.
my dad right now. And
Oh,
most people don't spend, that for 10 years. I think some people worry about that as a fear. Most people who stay in a nursing facility, long-term care, memory care, the median stay is about, I think the median stay is actually about 5 months, but the long-term stays, the people who actually go over 2 years, I think it's about 10% of people who enter.
it was just over $200,000 of benefits paid out because we had an
Yeah.
insurance policy. And I remember, my parents were very proud that they had this long-term care policy, and they talked about it all the time, and they put a lot of money into it.
Yeah, I was going to say, how much did they pay for those $200,000 of benefits?
They would have been better off investing it.
Yes.
And that was the thing that I always came back to, is like, well, you got a couple $100,000 of benefit, but you paid a long time into this,
Yeah.
and there was a cap on it for 5
Yeah.
years. So it was
Yeah, because
like,
you still have to, usually there's a delay before it starts and they only pay out X amount. So you still, a lot of people think, oh, I have this long-term care policy, so I won't have a bill if that comes. And I'm like, that's not necessarily how it works. It pays out X amount and you're responsible for the difference.
yeah, you just hit on a few, but I'm always like, hey, you got to, if you have a pile of money, you can borrow against the pile of money, security backed line of credit. If you have a house that's appreciated, you can borrow against the house with the HELOC. You want to get that before you retire, more than likely, because it might be a little tough to qualify. In retirement, you have access to things that in an emergency that you may not realize. And if you have an insurance policy that you've had for a while, index universal life or whole life, you can borrow against those. There's plenty of assets you can borrow against in a doomsday scenario. People are always, again, worried about the worst of times, and I get it.
Well, there's this terrible stat that goes around, and it says 7 out of 10. This comes from our government, that they will print these brochures saying 7 out of 10 retirees are expected to need long-term care services or supports. And that's the part that we need to focus on, because that encompasses everything from someone going get your groceries because you had a surgery for like 2 weeks and someone needing full-blown memory care. And I'm like, those are not the same things. They shouldn't be in the same stat, because most people who retire do not enter a long-term care facility. Most people do not enter a nursing facility. But the stat is scary.
It's fear of the unknown, and it's
Yeah.
fear, like we don't understand it. We don't really know. So it's that much bigger boogeyman. It's like what's in the closet, and it could be, your little kitty, but you don't know, and you just hear noises in it, and so you're scared of what's in the closet, and eventually just open up the closet, check it out. Hey, it's not a monster. There's things you can do in retirement to minimize these doomsday things that might be going on in the back of your head. It sounds like you're hearing some of that, because again, when you started and you said Treasury running out of money, I'm like, that's not something that can really happen.
No, I mean, when they talk about, when they talk about the trust fund running out of money, I mean, we do have reserves in the trust fund. We would still have workers today paying into the system. So benefits are in no way, even in a worst case scenario, benefits are not stopping. They would be able to pay out about 75 to 77% if Congress does nothing. But I believe Congress is going to do something. Overwhelmingly, I believe that.
I tend to agree with you. They have constituents in that.
Yes. And a lot of those older people vote.
They do vote in math. All right. I think that I've used a lot of your time. I appreciate it. Hey, guys, go to Erin's channel. She's a great creator and great information, very complimentary to a lot of what we talk about here on this channel. So, Erin, I'll put your link. If you have a comment for Erin, go ahead and throw it down in the comments.
I'll read them.
Yeah, if you come and check it out, and just maybe get in there and just type. And this is a topic that I think is needed. I don't always hit on it, so I really appreciate you coming in and enlightening us and sharing what you shared with our audience. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Like and subscribe, guys, and I'll see you later.
Bye.